Imagine waking up tomorrow morning and discovering that the price of gas has doubled overnight. Not because of a hurricane, not because of a pipeline accident, but because a country the size of Alaska, sitting on top of 208 billion barrels of oil, just cut off the world's most critical shipping lane. And the United States had seen it coming for over 70 years. That country is Iran. And the real question is this: why has America spent 7 decades obsessed with controlling it? What is the hidden truth behind every press conference, every sanction, every airstrike that Washington never quite explains directly? Today, we're going to answer that question. All the way from a CIA operation in 1953 that most Americans have never heard of, to the bombs falling on Tehran right now in 2026. Let's dive in. First, let's zoom out to the bigger picture. Most people think of Iran as simply America's enemy in the Middle East, a hostile theocracy with nuclear ambitions and proxy armies. And that is not wrong, but it is wildly incomplete. Because to understand why the US wants Iran, you have to understand what Iran actually is. Iran is not just a country. Iran is a geography that controls the destiny of the entire global economy. Here is what I mean. Iran sits at the center of a triangle connecting the Persian Gulf, the Caspian Sea, and Central Asia. It shares borders with 12 countries, including Iraq, Turkey, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and the former Soviet republics. To its south, it controls more than 1,500 miles of Persian Gulf and Gulf of Oman coastline. And at the very tip of that coastline sits a narrow strip of water just 21 miles wide at its narrowest point, the Strait of Hormuz, the most strategically important waterway on the surface of this planet. 21% of all global oil passes through it every single day. Every tanker going to Japan, South Korea, India, Europe, every LNG shipment that keeps German factories running and French households warm. If that strait closes, the global economy does not slow down. It stops. But here's where it gets interesting. Iran doesn't just border the Strait of Hormuz. Iran controls it. Iranian guns, Iranian drones, Iranian mines sit on both shores. And underneath Iran's territory, the fourth largest proven crude oil reserves on Earth, 208 to 209 billion barrels, 12% of all known oil reserves worldwide, and the second largest proven natural gas reserves on the planet, including its share of the South Pars field, the largest single gas field in the world, shared with tiny Qatar. Here is the natural experiment that should shock you. Iran and Qatar sit on top of the exact same gas field, same geology, same resource, same neighborhood. Qatar's GDP per capita today is over $80,000. Iran's under $4,000. Same oil and gas, 20 times the income gap. That difference is not geology. That difference is geopolitics, sanctions, and 70 years of American pressure. Now let's go back to where this all began. The year is 1951. Iran has a new prime minister. His name is Mohammad Mossadegh. He is a Harvard-educated Democrat, beloved by his people, elected through a legitimate parliamentary process. And he has one idea that terrified the most powerful people in Washington and London. He wants to nationalize Iran's oil. For decades, a British company called the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, what later became BP, had been extracting Iranian oil and paying Iran almost nothing. Iranian workers lived in poverty next to some of the richest oil fields on Earth. Mossadegh says, "This oil belongs to Iran." The Iranians agree. The world watches in admiration. But something important happens here. Britain doesn't just lose a business deal. Britain loses the crown jewel of its empire. So Britain goes to the CIA, and the CIA goes to work. In 1953, a covert operation codenamed Operation Ajax is run by CIA officer Kermit Roosevelt Jr., the grandson of President Theodore Roosevelt. Street mobs are paid. Military officers are bribed. fake communist pamphlets are distributed to frame Mossadegh. On August 19, 1953, the democratically elected Prime Minister of Iran is dragged out of his home, arrested, and imprisoned. The Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, is reinstalled as absolute ruler. And the oil deal? American companies now get a 40% cut. The CIA itself admitted this operation officially in declassified documents released in 2013. This is not a conspiracy theory. This is documented history. Now here's why it matters for everything happening today. The Iranian Revolution of 1979 was not random religious hysteria. It was the direct consequence of what happened in 1953. When Ayatollah Khomeini told Iranians that America was the great Satan, millions believed him. Because their grandparents remembered 1953. They remembered when America killed their democracy to protect its oil interests. The hostage crisis of 1979. The 52 American diplomats held for 444 days. The hatred that has defined U.S.-Iran relations ever since. It all flows from one CIA operation in 1953. But something important happens here. America's interest in Iran was never only about oil. It was about something bigger. Let's zoom out again. The Cold War is raging. The Soviet Union sits on Iran's northern border. If Iran falls to communism, the Soviets reach the Persian Gulf. They control the oil. They control the Strait of Hormuz. They control the energy supply of every U.S. ally in Western Europe and Asia. The entire post-war economic order collapses. This is what kept U.S. strategists awake at night from 1945 to 1991. Iran was not just an oil well. Iran was a firewall between Soviet power and the global economy. The CIA didn't just overthrow Mossadegh to steal oil. They overthrew him because they feared he would ally with the Soviet-backed Two-Day Party and hand the Soviets the keys to the Persian Gulf. History tells us they probably overreacted. Mossadegh was a nationalist, not a communist, but in the paranoid logic of the Cold War, the risk was deemed unacceptable. And so, they acted. Now let's fast forward. The Cold War ends in 1991. The Soviet threat disappears. Does America's interest in Iran disappear too? Absolutely not. Why? Because the game changes, but the prize stays the same. Now here's where it gets interesting. In 1974, the United States made a secret deal with Saudi Arabia. The deal was simple. Saudi Arabia sells oil only in US dollars. In return, the US provides military protection and buys Saudi debt. This deal was extended to the entire OPEC bloc, and suddenly, every country on Earth that needs oil has to hold US dollars to buy it. This is the petrodollar system. It is the foundation of American economic dominance. It is why the US can run massive budget deficits without collapsing, because the entire world is forced to hold and use dollars. Now, what does Iran do to this system? Iran tries to break it. After the 1979 revolution, Iran refused to sell oil in dollars. It pushed for euros, then yuan, then bilateral barter deals. Iran became the living proof that a major oil producer could operate outside the dollar system, and Washington could not allow that example to spread. Because if Iran can do it, Venezuela can do it. If Venezuela can do it, Russia can do it. And if Russia does it, China follows. And the petrodollar system, the invisible engine of American power, begins to crack. This is not a theory. This is what U.S. foreign policy analysts at the Hoover Institution, CSIS, and CFR explicitly identify as a core American interest in Iran. Control Iran, control the precedent, protect the dollar. But wait, there is a third layer, and this one might be the most explosive of all. Israel. Let's zoom out again and look at the map. Israel is a country of 9 million people, surrounded by 400 million Arabs and Persians, many of whom have never accepted its existence. For Israel, Iran is not just a rival. Iran is an existential threat. Iran funds Hezbollah, which sits on Israel's northern border with 150,000 missiles. Iran funds Hamas, which triggered the catastrophic war of October 2023. Iran funds the Houthis in Yemen, who spent months firing drones at Israeli and U.S. shipping. And Iran, according to U.S. and Israeli intelligence, was racing toward a nuclear weapon. Now here's the key point. The United States has a legal commitment to Israel's security. But more than a legal commitment, it has a strategic one. If Israel falls, or if Israel is forced to fight a nuclear-armed Iran, the entire Middle East order collapses. Saudi Arabia goes nuclear. Egypt goes nuclear. Turkey goes nuclear. Suddenly, the most unstable region on Earth is the most nuclear-armed region on Earth. U.S. power in the region evaporates. China and Russia move in. The global order that America built after World War II begins to unravel. So America's interest in Iran is not just about oil or the dollar. It is about preventing a chain reaction that redraws the entire global map. This is what Secretary of State Marco Rubio said in March 2026, when asked why the U.S. joined Israeli strikes on Iran. He said, "We were aware of Israeli intentions. We knew Iran would retaliate against U.S. bases. We acted preemptively to protect American lives." In other words, the U.S. didn't start this war, but Washington decided it was better to fight it on their terms than on Iran's. Now let's bring this all the way to 2026, because here is the brutal economic reality that most people miss. Iran has the fourth largest oil reserves on Earth, and its economy is in ruins. In 1979, $1 bought 70 Iranian rials. Today, $1 buys over 600,000 rials. The currency has lost 99% of its value. Not because Iran ran out of resources, but because America's sanctions campaign systematically cut Iran off from the global dollar system. When Iran was disconnected from SWIFT, the global banking messaging network, it could not receive payments for its oil in any major currency. Iranian oil revenues collapsed from $51 billion in 2018 to just $5 billion in 2020. A 90% collapse in just 2 years. Compare that to Qatar. Same gas field, no sanctions. GDP per capita 20 times higher. Iran's 93 million people are not poor because they lack resources. They are poor because Washington decided decades ago that a wealthy and powerful Iran was too dangerous to allow. And this is where things change. Because in 2026, that calculation has escalated from economic war to kinetic war. U.S. and Israeli strikes beginning February 28, 2026, have targeted Iran's missile infrastructure, naval assets, air defense systems, and nuclear sites. The U.S. has sunk Iranian warships as far away as the Indian Ocean. Trump has demanded unconditional surrender, and Iran's new interim leadership has responded with jihad fatwas and proxy attacks on U.S. bases. But what is the endgame? What does America actually want from Iran in 2026? Let's be honest about the real options. Option 1. Regime change. Washington installs a friendly government in Tehran, similar to what the Shah represented from 1953 to 1979. Iran's oil flows freely. The Strait of Hormuz is secured. The nuclear threat disappears. But here is the problem. The last time the U.S. installed a friendly regime in Iran, it held for 26 years, and then produced the most violently anti-American revolution in modern history. Option 2. Permanent weakening. Destroy Iran's military capacity without occupying the country. Leave a weakened, leaderless state that cannot threaten Israel, cannot close the strait, and cannot build a nuclear weapon. This is what Trump appears to be attempting with his 4 to 5 week timeline. But analysts warn that a power vacuum in Tehran could produce something far worse than the current regime. History agrees. It happened in Iraq. It happened in Libya. Option 3. A new deal. A negotiated settlement in which Iran gives up its nuclear program, its proxy network, and its anti-dollar posture in exchange for sanctions relief and security guarantees. This is what the JCPOA attempted in 2015. It partially worked. Iran's oil revenues recovered. Then, Trump tore it up in 2018. Sanctions returned, and the cycle of confrontation resumed. The question analysts are asking right now is, can you bomb your way to a negotiating table? History gives a mixed answer. Now, let's zoom out one final time. Because whether you support this war or oppose it, the financial implications are the same. Iran controls geography that cannot be ignored. 12% of global oil, second largest gas reserves, the Strait of Hormuz. Every week this conflict continues, oil prices carry a war premium. Every threat to Hormuz shipping pushes freight costs higher. Every higher energy cost feeds inflation in the US, Europe, and Asia. Higher inflation means the Federal Reserve has less room to cut rates. Less rate cuts means slower growth, tighter credit, and lower stock valuations. Gold benefits because it is the ultimate hedge against dollar instability and geopolitical risk. Bitcoin struggles because it trades like a risk asset, not a safe haven, when real fear is in the market. And the dollar itself? In the short term, it strengthens as a safe haven. But in the long term, a U.S. bogged down in another Middle East war, running trillion-dollar deficits, with inflation resurgent and allies questioning its judgment, is a dollar under structural pressure. That is the dollar endgame this channel was built to explain. So let's answer the original question. Why does the U.S. really want Iran? The answer is not one thing. It is everything. It is oil, it is the Strait of Hormuz, it is the petrodollar system, and the countries watching to see if they can escape it. It is Israel's security and the nuclear chain reaction that would follow an Iranian bomb. It is the Cold War logic that never fully died. It is the memory of 1953, when America made a fateful choice that created the enemy it now fights. And it is the terrifying possibility that if America does not control Iran, someone else will. China is already buying Iranian oil in yuan, quietly undermining the very petrodollar system the war is partly designed to protect. Russia is watching from the sidelines, hoping the U.S. exhausts itself in yet another Middle Eastern campaign. And Iran's 93 million people are caught in the middle of a 70-year power struggle that began with a CIA operation they never asked for. Could this be the moment the entire Middle East order is finally redrawn? Could 2026 be the year that either ends the standoff forever or creates the next generation of enemies? Leave your answer in the comments below, because next video, we are going back even further. We are going to answer this question. How did Israel and Iran go from secret allies sharing intelligence and oil deals to enemies calling for each other's destruction? It is one of the most extraordinary reversals in modern history, and most people have no idea it happened. Subscribe, hit the bell, and I will see you in the next one.